my name is Josie Manzano-Stettler, and I'm the Planning Practice Director at ArganoInterRel. Today, I'll be talking about FreeForm Apps in Cloud EPM. So just a little bit about me. I've been working with Hyperion Oracle EPM for about 20 years, both as a finance power user from industry and as a implementer and solutions architect for the last 15 years. So let's get this started. I have to talk a little bit about the awesome company I work for. Our mission statement is to leave the world a smarter place than we found it. So ArganoInterRel has been recognized 5 times as an Oracle EPM and Analytics Partner of the Year. I'm so lucky to work with quite a few industry rock stars who are Oracle aces and bloggers in the EPM and BI space. We have a wealth of experience in EPM, BI, cloud implementations, and we are regular participants in Oracle partner previews. Lastly, we offer a full stack of services, which include consulting, strategy, support services, training, and infrastructure. We are extremely proud of achieving a 77% Net Promoter Score. So NPS is a measure of how likely a customer is to recommend a company, product, or service to a friend or colleague. The industry average for system integrators is 24%. So you can see that we completely blow the score away. So this is the agenda for today. I'm going to start off with defining what is FreeForm Planning or FreeForm Apps. And then if you decide to migrate that Essbase application into EPM Cloud, what do you get? What comes with it? Also, I'll dive into that FreeForm versus Essbase 21C, because I know a lot of you are, kind of trying to decide which is the best fit for you. Then I'll talk about the different migration options, your implementation considerations, and then we'll wrap it up and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. So the EPM Cloud service has monthly patch releases. And the buzz from this month's release is the new multi-cube FreeForm Apps. We're all excited with the solution possibilities that this feature brings us. Now, FreeForm isn't new. It was first introduced 2 years ago with the EPM Enterprise Cloud offering. But up until this month, you can only have 1 cube per FreeForm application. So what does this new version look like? Well, first of all, it is still part of the EPM Enterprise Cloud offering, so you still need that license in order to take advantage of this new offering. Second, it's part of the planning deployment options. So there's 3 planning deployment options. There's the custom planning, which enables you to have up to 12 cubes. They're all custom. They could be BSO or ASO plan types. And second is module. So you have your modules, which is financials, workforce, capital, projects, as well as strategic modeling. And it comes with 8 custom cubes. However, there is a limitation on those custom cubes. You can only have 4 ASO and 4 BSOs. And then finally, we have FreeForm, which enables you to create 12 cubes. And these cubes could be ASO or BSO, or you can have a combination of both. And what's interesting enough, this is the only deployment option where you can actually have an application that is completely all ASO cubes. So though FreeForm is considered a planning application, it doesn't require that those 6 standard dimensions for each cube in the application. Those 6 dimensions are, or 6 standard dimensions are account, entity, period, year, scenario, version, and currency if you've enabled multi-currency. FreeForm is a lot like native Essbase, the native Essbase application, but it comes with the EPM platform governance. As Oracle puts it, this feature provides freedom and flexibility with corporate oversight. Now, here are the main features for FreeForm Apps. So as I mentioned before, you can create up to 12 cubes, ESO or ASO or both. There are two ways to create a FreeForm app. The first way being the ability to import an on-prem OTL or LCM. And then you could create from scratch the cubes and dimensions. You can have up to 29 dimensions if they include the entity, account, and time dimension types, as well as up to 26 custom dimensions. So as I mentioned before, you don't have that standard dimension requirement. You could flex the dimensions by cube. You could share the dimensions across cube or not. There's also no out-of-the-box dimension members that you have to work with or work around. And there's some clients out there that don't use that year dimension. So they're either trying to hide it if they have it as a planning application, or if it's an Essbase application, you just don't have that year dimension at all. And you probably have that time dimension that combines both years and periods, or you might even have a scenario dimension that includes the years. Well, this deployment option is for you. You can have that dimension that has that combination, that offers that combination, and not create that year dimension. Completely flexible. It's kind of like Excel. So it's important to note that this option is not solution oriented, but it is flexible to create whatever business solution that fits your needs. So say you're planning to migrate your native Essbase application. Let's talk about the benefits that you'll get right away. So FreeForm Apps is part of the EPM Enterprise Cloud subscription. So it is a SaaS deployment. And with that, you get the following. 2 environments, one for tests, the other for production. You get nightly backups, which you can schedule yourself. You get the monthly patches. So you get, basically you get right away the new features or any bug fixes. And these monthly patches are timed such that the first Friday, the test environments are updated, and then 2 weeks later, the production environments are updated. So a lot of times, there might be some instances where there are some issues with the latest changes, and hopefully they can all get caught in that period between the test and the production environments being upgraded, and most of the times they do. So enhancements are crowdsourced through the Customer Cloud Connect Idea Lab forum. So if you have a great idea for an enhancement, you could add it to this forum, and then basically users can vote up or vote down. And that's how they could prioritize. That's how Oracle prioritizes their new enhancements. And then finally, the environment is completely Oracle managed. Also, right away, you can leverage those planning assets and the latest innovations like web forms, dashboards, navigation flows. So all of those standard EPM artifacts that you get once your application is created, as well as the latest innovation. So the items that I highlighted here, web ad hoc, dynamic tabs, cell level security, flex forms from SmartView, are all features that actually was released very recently, within the last, I guess, probably around the second half of this year. And right away, our clients are using them and taking advantage of them. So, these, definitely you could use these new innovations right away once you've migrated your application. And finally, for those of you who are Essbase add-in diehards, SmartView now provides in-sheet POV, multi-grid functionality. You could submit with that refresh. You could also have multi-parent zoom in. And then coming soon, and we're waiting with such an anticipation, the member and alias display. Can hardly wait. Been waiting forever. All right, so let's talk about FreeForm versus Essbase 21C. So this question comes up all the time, especially when you're dealing with, you have your on-premise Essbase and where to go next, what's the right fit for you? So here are some considerations when choosing between them. Okay, so because they both have their own swim lanes. So FreeForm would be a strong consideration if that app is end user focused. So primarily managed by the business, and IT has a very, very small role in managing this application. Also, if the data that it consumes and it's shared is primarily within the EPM ecosystem. Definitely, if you already have an enterprise subscription and the EPM users largely overlap with the Essbase users, then that decision should be a slam dunk. And lastly, if you desire to have that SaaS model, basically those hands-off administration, you don't want to have to deal with any kind of infrastructure responsibilities, then FreeForm would be your choice. I'm sorry, just pausing. I thought I saw some hands raised, and I'm not sure where I could. Okay, so if you have any questions, by the way, can you please enter them in the Q&A box? That would make it a lot easier. Oh, okay. All right. So let me address that. So there's a question here. So what IT infrastructure responsibilities do customers have with OCI? So basically, you're responsible for your own upgrades. So you would install your upgrades, whereas in FreeForm, this is completely managed by Oracle. Okay. All right. So on the other side, the Essbase on OCI would be a better fit if your company has a staff already in place to manage the infrastructure responsibilities, and you want to keep full control over the settings and configuration of the environment. So in FreeForm or in the cloud, we don't have, so if you have native Essbase right now, you can go into that configuration section and actually update them, modify them. In the cloud, you can't do that. You don't have visibility, or you have very, very limited configuration control. But in customer managed, you have full control and flexibility. Now, if your cubes are utilizing transparent and/or replicated partitions, that might be a reason to go with Essbase on OAC. Also, if you have federated partitions to the autonomous database, or if your Essbase cubes are data sources for Oracle Analytics and or Autonomous Database. If you're using versioning or shadow cubes. And then finally, if your Essbase cubes are basically data lake repositories. So all of this are in the swim lane of Essbase OAC. And if you check these boxes, OAC, Essbase on OAC, oh, sorry, I'm using the old terminology. Essbase on OCI might be a better fit for you. Okay, both great products, but definitely they have different purposes. All right. Okay, so again, can I ask you guys to put your questions on the Q&A section? It'll just make it easier for me to it'll just make it easier for me to keep track of it because I'm looking at both windows right now. Okay. All right. Okay, so in this section, I have a few quick demos to show you on the application creation process. And then I'll also talk about a few implementation considerations. As I mentioned before, FreeForm Apps is part of the planning business process. So when you create a FreeForm application, you will need to go to planning. So when you hit planning, you will see this screen here, and then you're going to create a new application. So I have, as I mentioned, I have 2 short demos on the different ways to create a FreeForm application. So I'll first show importing an OTL file. I'm not going to use LC, I'm going to use an OTL file. And the second one is I'm going to use the create cubes option. All right, so I think how I'll handle this, guys, is that let me take your questions at the end. I think it just right now I guess I'm having a little problem trying to like time the questions with my with where I am in the presentation. So if you don't mind, definitely put your questions in the Q&A, and I'll get back to it at the end when we're talking about Q&A. All right, okay, so watch carefully. These demo recordings actually go really fast. Okay, so when you select create a new application, you are going to see this application creation UI. And first you would, of course, type your name and a description of your application. And then you would select the application type, FreeForm. And then in this case, I'm actually going to import an OTL file. So I'm going to import it from my local drive and then choose the file. So here's my OTL file, and I'm going to open that. And then I'm going to hit next and then review the information. That looks great. So I'm going to create it. And voila, that's it. You've created your application. That was really, really, really quick. So at this point, you can either create more cubes or add more dimensions, but it's important to note that you can only use one OTL file per application. So if the application that you're importing involves multiple cubes, unfortunately, you can only import one OTL file. So pick that OTL file that has basically most of your dimensions or all of your dimensions that you're going to use across the cube. After you after you go through this process, you can proceed with either importing or creating your dimension members, importing the other artifacts from your application, and basically start building out the rest of your application. But at this point, your application shell is there. All right. Now, the other way to create a FreeForm application is through the Create Cubes option. So here, this is where you're going to just pretty much start from scratch. So again, you're going to put the name, description of your application, select your application type. All this is the same. But at this point, now on the application setup, you're going to pick Create Cubes. And then you're going to specify the number of cubes. So from 1 through 12. Okay. And then you're going to provide names for those cubes. So the first one I'll call P&L. And the second one I'll call Fin Report. And then for the Fin Report cube, I'm going to make that one an ASO. Okay. And click Next. At this point, I'm going to actually enable some dimensions, the dimension type dimension. So I'll do account and entity. Now, this is completely optional. You could do this now, or you could do this later. You could add those dimensions later. But at this point, I chose to enable them at the application creation process, and then you could create your cube. So at this point, again, you can continue on and add more cubes or add more dimensions. What I'd like to do is, kind of do this in steps. So I will, create the initial cubes, enable some dimensions, and at this point, I would probably refresh the application. And then before I proceed with adding more cubes or adding more steps, just in case that's, something goes wrong, at least I know at what step where it went wrong, and it's easier for me to resolve that issue and pinpoint what had happened. Right, and now I'm going to show a little bit about how to add additional dimensions. Now, if you've previously worked with either custom or the module planning applications, this is very familiar territory for you. You would basically add those dimensions and additional cubes exactly the same way. So for those of you not seen that, it's fairly easy. So you would go to the application tab, go to the overview tab, find dimensions. Then you can see here in the P&L cube, I already enabled account and entity. For Fin Report, I have account and entity from the application creation. Now at this point, I want to actually create a dimension. I'll call it time. And then I'm going to enable it for the P&L and Fin Report cubes. Hit done. Then you can see that dimension was added to the P&L cube and also the Fin Report cube. Now I want to add one more dimension for Fin Report. Let's call this view. So I'm going to just enable it for Fin Report. Okay, then you can see that added. You can see also that I have no members right now. I'm going to add those a little bit later. Okay. All right, so after this point, I'll go ahead and refresh my database. And for those of you who have done this for a module or for a custom, this is exactly the same way. This should be very familiar for you. Okay. And like I said, you can continue on adding more dimensions or adding more cubes. And then I think in the demo, I'm sorry, I can't go, I'll have a hard time going back, but maybe keep it back and pause it. But let me actually run this one more time, because I just want to show the, sorry, trying to go ahead. Okay, pause it right here. Okay, so if you wanted to add more dimensions and say when you add that dimension, or actually when you want to add when you're ready to add your dimension members, you can actually import it. So you can import, what I like to do is, because sometimes, you know, the import files or format is different between native Essbase and the cloud. A lot of times they are. What I would do is at this point, I would, after I create that dimension, I'll export it, you know, just so that I have the template to work with. And then I would take an export from the metadata, from the on-premise, from the metadata of your on-premise application, and then fit it into that template. And then I would import it here, import the new metadata file here. So basically that's, you know, normally what I would do to actually import or build the dimensions from your existing on-premise application. All right, so let me move on ahead. All right, so if you are migrating an on-premise application to FreeForm, there are a few things to consider. So first of all, those OTL or LCM files, they need to be at least version 11.124 or later. Also, it's important to note that the outlines also need to be non-encrypted. Now, if you have a EPM or EPM8 rather, EPM8 application, you've been holding out for a long time. Unfortunately, they must be converted. Okay, they must be converted to Classic prior to migrating to FreeForm. Also, this still holds the same. Your member names still need to be unique across the dimensions within the application. So yes, if you have 12 cubes across the application, across your dimensions within that application, they still need to be unique. Also, you'll need to manage the restricted names and reserved words in Essbase prior to exporting your OTL or LCM. Also, it's advantageous to do that at this point, not only to facilitate your import of your OTL and LCM, but also to facilitate the import and export, or sorry, the import of your data that you're going to be moving from the old application to the new. You won't have to deal with remediating those issues regarding the name changes that you had to do. Okay. So these are some very, very, very high level steps to prepare your application for migration. So you can see that, you know, it was pretty fast and very simple, but it does save you a lot of time to actually, you know, stop and strategize this. Take a little time to strategize this before you actually do it. I think the good thing about working in the cloud is that initially you're going to find that you're going to be recreating your application a lot. So you know, it's pretty easy to actually blow away your application and recreate it. However, you want to minimize that, because you know, as you get further and further, it's going to take more time to actually reset up your application. So it does, you know, you know, there is definitely a reason to take the time and actually strategize this, you know, even if it's just this, you know, a pretty straightforward migration, just to make sure that you have all your bases covered. So you want to review your application that you're going to migrate, you know, whether it be an Essbase or Planning on-prem, if it's an ASO or BSO. And then you know, if you do have a EPM enterprise environment, you want to see how it fits in to that ecosystem, right? So what data flows are going to be happening there, in and out of that application. Okay. And next, what you should do is also strategize that application configuration process. So if you are going to be using the OTL LCM import, again, pick the right outline because you only can use one. Also determine how many cubes you're going to be created and which dimensions, will be shared. Basically lay out the dimensions for all the cubes that you're going to create ahead of time. And then next, you're going to take inventory of all of your planning or Essbase artifacts. Okay, so take inventory of them. All right, a lot of them you might be able to directly import those, either through LCM files or through the native export functionality. You can export it there and import it into the cloud. So a lot of those planning or Essbase artifacts can be handled that way. Some can't, right? So, but there are cloud equivalent, what we call cloud equivalent artifacts where you would have to take some time and actually convert your native Essbase or on-premise artifact to the new cloud version, right? So I guess what comes to mind is that if you have some business rules that utilize custom defined functions and CDFs, you might not be able to just import that directly. You might have to rewrite that in Groovy. So you need to find that whatever that cloud equivalent and configure to replace that feature. The next three areas is where I would say probably you would spend the most time in your migration process, and that would be data integration, reporting, and security. So for data integration, if you have Maxell scripts or report scripts that you're utilizing, they have to be converted to utilize data management or data integration from the cloud, as well as EPM Automate. So you would need to actually rewrite those artifacts to use those tools. Okay. Also with reporting, so there's different options in reporting, and depending what what options you choose, it might dictate how much adjustments you need to make to your reporting artifacts. So in most cases, you can directly import those reporting artifacts, but you will need to make some level of adjustments. So not only reconfiguring your connections, but you might have to make some other adjustments just because it is a different tool. Whether you'd be using the reporting functionality that's directly comes with planning, or if you're using, say, narrative reporting. Okay. And lastly, security. So security is managed differently from on-prem. It is managed in the identity domain, or IDM. And you will need to rebuild your security configuration through multiple exports. So a lot of these components from your on-premise application can be exported and imported into the cloud. Okay, it's just not a one-shot deal. To migrate that security, you're going to have to do it in pieces, and like I said, you can leverage a lot of the exports that are provided through your on-premise application. Now there might be some artifacts that you might have to completely replace. Okay, so like for instance, Essbase filters. All right, you don't have Essbase filters in the cloud, and so you might need to either replace the functionality that comes out of your Essbase filters through a combination of, say, your dimensional security that's in the cloud, or you could leverage the new cell level security functionality, which I think is just amazing and awesome. I had to go through hoops before cell level security came online. So it's definitely a fabulous feature. Lastly, you could also leverage the valid intersection functionality too. So when I've gone through a migration, I've used one or a combination of these tools to replace what I previously had in place with the Essbase filters. Now, if you are creating an application from scratch, you should be going through, your traditional implementation milestones for that application, for that new application. Basically, you go through your requirements, your design, build, test, and deploy. Okay, because it's a brand new application. All right, we reached the end. So I've got 3 takeaways. Okay, so first being the FreeForm option. Basically, what's its value proposition is that it's flexible. It provides the flexibility with governance. Now, if you're going to migrate your Essbase applications into EPM Cloud as FreeForm Apps, you could it's readily enhanced, right? It's readily enhanced to leverage those off-the-shelf planning artifacts and innovations. So you can use those web forms, right? You don't have to use those Excel macro workbooks anymore. So you could use web forms. You could use the dashboards. That comes off the shelf. You can use those right away. And basically, you could also this will enable you to build a platform of connected processes and data. So the FreeForm option can be your start of building your cloud architecture. Or if you already have the EPM Enterprise, it could be an expansion of what you already have, right? So if whether that be other EPM business processes like planning or FCC, this FreeForm application could be a reporting queue, or it could be a specialized planning application for, say, revenue, where possibly the dimensionality is completely different, completely different from your main planning application. Okay, but putting it all in this domain basically gives you the opportunity to connect these. The integration is a lot more simpler, I would say, in most cases, and or it could be managed, by with basically minimal coding, because you have those data. You also have those data maps that currently are providing integration between cubes, but down the road, from what we're hearing, is that that could be also cross pod. So that's something that we're hoping to see in maybe the next 6 months or so. Okay, now it's time for Q&A, and I am going to open the Q&A window because I think there's a lot. All right, so for OCI, do we get access to the servers? I believe so. So again, it's like your on-premise deployment that it is customer managed. So I believe you do have access to that. Okay. All right. Next, can you talk a little more about the limitations for loading data into FreeForm? Sounds like all the data has to come from other apps on the cloud platform. No, that so it's as far as loading data, so it doesn't use data load rules. There's an equivalent of that. Basically, we're using data management. Data management has its, I guess, functionality of data load mechanisms to load that FreeForm application. And then data management, if you haven't seen it already, and it's basically it's in the process of actually eventually being replaced by what they call data integrations. But you have the ability to, it looks like FDMEE, it looks like a light version of FDMEE, that you have the ability to actually map. You can incorporate mappings, into that tool for loading your data, transforming your data. I mean, as far as loading limitations, I'm not sure. I really haven't gotten into any limitations as far as data loading. Basically the cloud tools, there is a solution to load that data either through data management, data integration. That pretty much covers it. Or between cubes, you could use the data maps to move the data between the cubes. All right, next question. It looks like Essbase OCI is the right version for clients using OAC with Essbase as one of the data sources, right? Any additional information that you could share about Essbase OCI? One thing is, I believe that there is a webcast that was actually played a couple of weeks ago. So what you could also do, if you want more information about Essbase OCI, is actually go through the ArganoInterRel webpage, and you can actually view past previous webcasts. So definitely, I think I would check that out to get definitely, deeper information regarding Essbase OCI. We our Oracle ACE, it actually presented that that webcast, and he is definitely the guru. Glenn, he's the guru with Essbase, and works really close with the product development team for analytics, and so he has the latest and greatest information. But it depends, just because you have it in OAC, maybe, may or may not be, right away the right tool for Essbase OCI. I think, other factors come, you'd have to consider, like, for instance, if that data is a reporting cube and it largely consumes your EPM data. I think that that's definitely a point on the EPM side or on the FreeForm side, to kind of just bring it in, because it'll make the integration a lot easier, a lot more elegant than having to jump from EPM to OCI and back. Okay. What is ASO? All right, so this sounds like an Essbase newbie. So ASO stands for aggregate storage option. So there's two types of Essbase cubes. I'm sorry, I gotta check time. All right, so there's two types of Essbase cubes, and one is the BSO. It used to be three, so BSO hybrid, and ASO. So BSO, but nowadays we consider that BSO is BSO hybrid. So BSO is block storage option, and ASO is aggregate storage option. So the difference between the two, or the use cases rather between the two, is in block storage option. That's where we would probably pick block storage option to basically do our complex calculations in there, right? So if there's a lot of calculation heavy processes, then we would probably put it in the BSO cube. Okay. It also handles user input really well. Especially if you are you might be entering at a parent level, so it's depending on, of course, your parents have to be the right data storage has to be in place, like assuming it's not all hybrid, but you can actually do, say, target entries in there that will drive down into into the children. So you could do something like that, you know, in a BSO cube, which is why your planning cubes are mainly BSO, right? ASO, aggregate storage option, was mainly used to, you know, for your reporting, you know, your reporting, it's your reporting repository mainly. You know, you can do calculations in there, but it does well. Its swim lane is like that rack and stack. You know, if you are, it's highly scalable. You could put a lot of data in there and not really sacrifice the performance of the cube. You know, with BSO, you know, there is, you know, I'd say there's a sweet spot, you know, in terms of the number of dimensions that you can actually put in there before you start sacrificing performance. With ASO, that, you know, that dimension limit is a lot higher. Okay, so you could definitely add a lot more dimensions there, a lot more data, so you could archive a lot of data. BSO, we like to keep it pretty slim, and, you know, like the working data, we like to put like a minimal amount of historicals and your working data in the BSO cube so that performance is not sacrificed. Hopefully that answers your question. Is hybrid supported? Definitely. For EPM, for the EPM platform, it's basically by default, you know, that you have hybrid. Now, you could choose not to enable it by basically not, you know, for your, you know, for your, in your dimensions, if your parents are not set to dynamic, you know, you could avoid that hybrid behavior. But basically, you know, all of the cubes all your BSO cubes are hybrid, basically hybrid enabled. Okay. Can I create member formulas in calc scripts? Absolutely. Yes, yes, you can. So of course, for BSO, you know, you could create your member formulas, and you have your calc scripts are basically come to the form of business rules now, right? So they act the same way. You just kind of launch it maybe a little bit differently. So, but you definitely have, you know, member formulas and calc scripts. Now in ASO, you or not calc scripts, you call it business rules, right? In ASO, you do have member formulas, but those member formulas are now written MDX. Okay, so you have MDX, and then the business rules, you know, you have your choice of either those graphical business rules, which you would, you know, there are graphical components that you could leverage, like a formula component or a POD component, so you could build your business rule the graphical way, or the other way is Groovy. So Groovy is supported in the BSO and in ASO. So you can create your business rules in Groovy in both forms. Okay. What's the plan for EAS on both EPM Cloud and OCI? So EAS, okay, so in EPM Cloud, there's, you know, what looks like EAS. You can access that, and basically you could use that to, you know, there's limited functionality. There's definitely, you know, not the same functionality as EAS on premise, but in EPM Cloud, what, you know, there is a window there that enables you to see, like, you know, some of to actually see the statistics, you know, your application statistics, like your block sizes and, you know, your index sizes, file sizes, everything, stuff like that. You can't really optimize those statistics, right? So, you know, so you're kind of locked in there. But you can, you know, you can still, you know, change your sparse and dense dimension settings in FreeForm. Okay. And I believe you can also, you know, set your dimension order. Okay. Also, what you could do within this it's called the database properties console in EPM Cloud, is you can also view your sessions, and you can kill sessions if you have to, like a runaway business rule. You can go into sessions and actually kill it. So you do have that EAS type ability, but definitely you can't, like, say, manage your dimensions in this particular interface, right? So there is a separate interface, where you would manage that dimensions, but not in this, EAS-like interface. As far as OCI, they have a equivalent of an EAS. It's actually pretty slick. So it does have a lot of the EAS type functionality in there, and they tried to make it really, really closely aligned with your on-premise, but I think it has even more. So, definitely, like I said, check out Glenn's webcast. I believe it was a couple of weeks ago or so, but he does do a demo and show the EAS, the EAS console in OCI. I think you'll like it better. All right. All right. We have planning application with workforce enabled. We have other cubes that are hitting version limit member. We are thinking about converting the whole application to FreeForm to leverage the limitations, to leverage the limitation-less dimensions. Okay, I didn't see a question there. So yeah, so one thing with I guess with the modules, there are what we call best practice guidelines, right? So and these guidelines come in the form with warnings. So they could be warnings, and at some point when you hit a certain threshold, it might even error out. Right. But for most of these, guidelines, just to let you know, if they, you can also work with your, you put in a request, an SR request, and they could review it. They'll review your application. Product development will review your application and decide whether or not to, raise the limit, so that you could keep your application or not. But definitely with FreeForm, the advantage of that is that you don't, it's completely free form. You don't have those module limitations, but they are there for a reason. And they are they do facilitate best practice behavior in your application creation. Okay, so what I would do first, before you actually go down that path, is I would see if I could, I would raise an SR and see if you could raise that limit first. Okay. All right. So happy that member formulas are MDX. Yes, for ASO. Okay. Are calc scripts MDX2 or BSO scripting? So it's, so it's kind of interesting. So as far as calc scripts and MDX, what I personally do is I actually create a dynamic, what's called a dynamic member within ASO, and so that would actually have what looks like a MDX business rule in a sense, but it's all within the member formula. And then what I would do is I would have a business rule, either a traditional graphical ASO business rule or a Groovy business rule that would copy the results that are generated by that dynamic member into a stored member. Okay, so you can have calculations in ASO, but it does it involves a little bit more creativity. But what's lovely about it is you could leverage the breadth and scale of ASO, and basically the speed of ASO. which I love. So especially if you're dealing with very large data sets, you could actually do that. BSO scripting. So yeah, that's still there. That's definitely still there for the BSO side, right? So you have Calc Manager, and there's a lot of cool functionality in Calc Manager that aids your that provide aids for your BSO scripting. Okay. What you're going to find when you at least you're going to see it more with the modules. Now with if you're doing freeform, you might not come across it right away unless you're working with an implementer. But in terms of BSO business rules writing, it's come a long way, and there's a lot more tools to take advantage of when you're scripting business rules in BSO. Like you could use templates. Templates are definitely cool to use. Because you can have probably reusable code. That you want to move from place to place. They have like what they call I know I'm going to butcher this, but they have basically these decision decision templates that you could also use. So if it's it'll check for a certain condition, and then it'll go it'll use this code or that. So there's definitely other tools that you can leverage in your BSO scripting with Calc Manager. Okay, can you migrate on-premise workforce to a FreeForm app? So if we're talking about the module, you basically you would I would I would also consider the custom application as well, because if you could do FreeForm app, that just tells me that you have enterprise, right? You have the enterprise subscription. So I would also look at the custom deployment option as well, just because you have kind of similar right now. If you have your on-premise workforce, you have like at least foundationally some of the features that are already there, whereas in FreeForm application there might be some things that you might have to build from scratch. So definitely you would have to do a gap assessment. I would do a gap assessment between the two, but it won't. I can tell you this, that it is the module. It won't migrate exactly as is, right? So there you might have to bring it in pieces. Basically you're building a custom application, but that would be either whether in custom planning or in FreeForm. ASO only. Seems like you were saying both ASO and BSO and ASO are MDX now. No, no, they're not both MDX, right? So you still have the your traditional BSO scripting syntax, that you would use for your member formulas and your business rules. But maybe added to that, you could also use Groovy, right? Which is completely different, syntax, right? But Groovy can be used in both ASO and BSO. So in BSO, you still have that, the traditional BSO syntax, Essbase language, as well as Groovy. And then ASO, you have MDX and Groovy to choose. Okay, so time's up.
Yes, Josie, great timing and wonderful presentation. Before we wrap up, I would like to provide you all with a few updates. If you enjoyed today's content, please be sure to register today for next week's webcast, Introduction to Groovy, and then we're going to wrap up the month of April with a Financial Consolidation and Close Basics in 60 minutes or less webcast. I went ahead and dropped the registration links to both webcasts in the chat box, so be sure to save your spot today. Registration is now open for Casco. Join us in person this summer in Grapevine, Texas for this highly anticipated event. As a gift to you, save $100 on registration by using the exclusive code ArganoInterRel at checkout. And this will conclude today's session. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And if you have any additional questions regarding the content, please shoot us an email at info@interrel.com. I went ahead and also dropped that in the chat box for you. Josie, do you have any final thoughts?
Thank you so much and have a great day. Have a great Wednesday.